What's up, you heathens and demons, you sinners and saints? Welcome back to Seeing Red. Allie's here. We have Momma Atheist here. Before I throw it to Allie real quick, I want to thank those that have donated. Yuri Bench, Divine Disbelief, and a special thank you to the Green family. I believe you're Christians. Even I could be wrong, but I believe you're Christians and that you started following me due to my work with that Christian blogger. So I want to thank you for your donation last night. But yeah, what's up, Allie?
Hey all, so I wanted to give you guys a quick update. We're not going to be talking for COVID for the most part tonight, just because like we've been talking about it a lot lately, and if it comes up, it comes up, but we're not going to be talking about it for the most part. But there's been a lot of people who've reached out to me on social media and other places, and I've just been too overwhelmed to answer every individual person other than the people that I'm closest to, so I wanted to let you all know his test results have been delayed by a day. There's apparently been an overwhelm at the particular lab that it got sent to, so it's going to be another more day before we know whether or not he is officially tested positive. That said, although his fever is still down a little bit between 101 and 102, his lungs are getting worse. He's having to kind of stay on his CPAP machine. He's got sleep apnea. In order to breathe properly. And he also, like the Tamiflu that they gave him is giving him some really nasty side effects. We had to call them today and ask them whether we should keep giving it to him or not because he was so dizzy he couldn't get to the bathroom earlier. So we're not out of the road. We're not out of the woods yet. We don't know anything for certain yet, apart from the fact that he's extremely sick, but we're still taking every precaution. He's still staying in his room. We're making sure that he stays fed and watered, even if I have to make him eat sometimes because he's scared of the nausea and stuff. So there's your guys' update on how the hubby is doing. That said, we have a special guest on here tonight. Brand new channel, however, a very, very fun person to talk to. If y'all haven't seen any of her interviews over on Math Pig's channel, first off, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Go sub to Math Pig. Like, he's great and his conversations are awesome, and he can bring a lot of really diverse voices onto his channel that may not come onto a space like this. So great work over there with the conversations and stuff that he's having, but she's been quite the firebrand over there, and there's a climate scientist with a undergraduate background in astrophysics as well, so we're always excited to talk to scientists. Welcome, Momma Atheist.
Hi, I'm Amanda. Said new to my own channel. I've been around a little bit in the community though, especially with the group of Aussies, like Atheist Pastor and Nerbardia and Vagrant Sam, and Mr. Bear. I hang out with them a lot. We do Friday night.
Nerbardia had super nice things to say about you when I mentioned that you were coming on.
Yeah, she was the one who she brought me in with the Aussies, and the Aussies kind of brought me on into the community itself. They started bringing me onto Six Pack, and which is really early in the morning on Fridays for Americans, but it's a lot of fun. Which is just a group of and Jen's Little Corner too, who's my co-host on another show. They drink. I did drink once. I drank this past week because Math Pick was on with us. But it's just a bunch of friends that are atheists that talk about shit, and it's nothing too serious. So that's a lot of fun. But I do with my channel, I do some atheist stuff. I do some climate science stuff. I have a show on the weekends I do called TV Time, where every weekend I have another YouTuber atheist, usually because they're my friends really, that we discuss a show. Like the first weekend I did with Jay from the Nevermore Tavern, we talked about Buffy and Angel. This past weekend I did with Vagrant Sam, we did BoJack Horseman.
BoJack Horseman's a damn good show. I loved it. Like, I love the finale. I knew it was super, I knew the ending episode was super contentious, but I think that what they did was absolutely brilliant.
Oh, it was. And one of the reasons that I love it so much is because it's so realistic with so much of it, with depression, with drug abuse, with death, with just everything. It is, even though it's a comedy and it's a cartoon, it's still really just down to earth. And Vagrant Sam had done a show on his own channel about it, and so I brought him on and we did that. We're doing The Sopranos this weekend. Bionic Dance is doing Babylon 5 with me. Like, it's a lot of fun. It's just something different than like the really serious stuff, like the science and atheism. It's just something fun to do.
Hey, with names that big, you're definitely going to be headed on an upward trend, which is probably good, because considering some of the discussions that I've seen, like, you're definitely going to be a huge asset to the community. I know that you've been super insecure in a few of our DMs and stuff, and I've mentioned it publicly before a little bit, but like, you'll get used to talking on camera. Like, it's something that happens over time. But so that we can kind of move a little bit away from the uncomfortable let's talk about me stuff and into the let's have some fun and get angry together, because that's what this channel is at least partially about. You said that you wanted to talk a little bit about your work in climate science and how you feel that this administration has been handling climate science. So I'll let you start whichever side of that question you want to, whatever you feel the most comfortable with. But I think that's going to be a fun conversation, personally.
Yeah, fun and angry, but yeah, no.
Okay, angry can be fun depending on how you treat it.
If you saw, did you see
I never get angry ever.
Nope,
see my
never.
thing with Mark Sargent, the flat earther, because
bit where you told him to go suck your dick.
Yes. Yeah, as angry as I was, I mean, it was fun too.
I didn't see that. Allie told me about it, but I know Mark Sargent, or I don't know him, but I've seen him, and he deserves it. So
he's infamous.
Yeah, well, he didn't. It wasn't just the flat Earth thing when he did, because he was on MathPig's channel before that, for the hour doing the interview, and he started right out of the gate with talking about Sandy Hook, which I had a problem with. I'm from Connecticut, so that really pissed me off more. He talked about 9/11. Like, it was just like everything he could, every conspiracy theory that was just total and utter bullshit that he knew was going to be controversial. He went after, and
we had a similar experience with PMARS on here. We mistakenly let him on because he came on in the side chat as a
banana man.
Yeah, banana. And so, we were like, all right, well, you're new, so we're worried about porn bombing. If you come on camera, you can come on to discuss with us. He's like, send this Christian a link. And then he forgot to change his name, so we figured out it was PMARS. But when he came on, he decided to go for the one world government, and all of the, all climate science is funded by the elites, and it's a hoax to try to get a one world government. So, you're a climate scientist. Has all the work that you've done been funded by one group?
Well, yes, absolutely. It's NASA, because
it's George Soros, you mean?
Well, actually, I used to work with NASA. I used to not the shuttle program, but I used to run an education program called the Challenger Learning Center. So I had explained to Sargent, I was like, I don't want to talk about, because he started with the moon landing. I was like, I don't want to talk about it, and he brought it up right away. But no, I don't understand why, especially since a lot of the people that really fight vocally against climate change being real happen to be a lot of the very rich people. So I don't know where they're getting, if they mean intellectually elite or what, but in terms of it being a hoax, or calling it a hoax, it always tends to be, the politicians who I still don't believe in climate change. I think they're just in the pockets of big oil. So, no, we're not funded. I mean, upwards of 98%, 98% of the world's top scientists believe not only is it real, but that it's, a majority of climate change is caused by human activity. So, and I think people outside of the scientific community it's easy for them to say, oh, scientists are liars. But when you work in science and the rigorous standards you're held to, and how all the the peer review and everything that you have to go through in order to publish anything or just working in the field at all, it's so utterly ridiculous to hear them say, oh, it's a hoax and you guys are just getting paid off or something. So
well, and I think that that's an actual really interesting thing to bring up, because like I haven't done I volunteered at a museum in the geology department for the college that I used to go to. And one of the projects that we did, it wasn't specifically a climate project in the same sense, but it was an ecological research project. Basically, what we did was we took sediment samples, or rather, sediment samples were taken and sent to us from a bunch of different locations around the Puget Sound region, like the Puget Sound watershed. And we would measure, like we'd clean them, and then we would measure the number of diatoms of various species and subspecies that we would find. And that would give us an indication of whether or not chemical cleanup projects were going well, or whether new pollution was in certain areas, because like certain compounds that we were monitoring would cause an explosion of growth in some subspecies of diatoms and some species of diatoms, and would kill off a bunch of others.
Trust me, Ali, they give no fucks about any of that shit no more. Trump's in office.
But I mean, like this was a publicly funded project that's been going on for like 20 years.
Mm. That happens a lot with plankton too. Certain chemicals in the water will end up causing an explosion of plankton to grow both in freshwater and some parts of the ocean, to the point where the surface gets covered and everything below it asphyxiates, because it cannot get the light it needs to grow and to be able to work as a community. You know, all the flora and fauna that thrive underneath. Every ecosystem is very delicate, and when you completely cover up an area so that no light gets down to the bottom of that lake or lower levels of that ocean, then things die and it sucks. So
I'm going to divert really quick. This is a reminder. So Song of Eternal Ministries, you might be a little bit new around here. If you want to spam the same thing over and over, that actually is a bannable offense. If you want to have a conversation, have a conversation. If you keep spamming a different version of the same thing over and over, our mods can kick you out.
Yeah, and Misha, I allow proselytizing, but the spamming definitely not. So, that's why I just kind of warned you. I know you're trying to pretend you're not Misha and all, but, dude, stop being Misha. Just proselytize.
I mean, if you're not Misha, you're acting like him. So, like, seriously, just, stop spamming your shit and have a conversation.
Sure it's Misha, but whatever. Yeah, maybe it's not, but 99.9% sure.
Yeah, this Song Ministries person, the first thing I read from them in chat was something about me needing to find God. And sweetie, no, honey, no, it's not going to happen. You can come at me all you want. You're not going to scare me. You're not going to convince me. No, sorry. So.
Well, and like I'm in a completely different position there, but coming back to kind of talking a little bit about the ecological research stuff, the point that I was trying to make there was, there were so many conditions under which samples even could be discredited. Like if there was a puncture in the bag and, potential like contamination because of that, then that was one of those things. If we didn't follow the perfect proper procedure when cleaning it and any sort of trace amounts of certain like chemicals within the lab were found in it, then then our work would be discarded and they have to get a new sample. Like there is so much that goes into even just a tiny study like that. Yeah. And that is a very narrow focus of research that we're kind of looking at here. It's chemical cleanup. That's not even like the whole of climate science. But, that said, on that point, I think part of the problem the lay public might have, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but even that little bit that I was just talking about under ecological research can count under the umbrella of quote climate science, because you can study the impact of those chemicals that are in the water and what they do to the larger environment and things of that nature. There's so many different branches of science that are involved. There's so much research that's involved. So when you start talking about scientific consensus, like you're talking about meteorology, you're talking about geology, you're talking about, ecological science, you're talking about biology, you're talking about, there's oceanography, chemistry, like you're talking about so many different branches of science. One human that said nothing but like from the moment they were born and could be taught to read and did nothing their entire life but read studies and were somehow trained magically from that time that they learned how to read to understand them, probably still could not grasp the whole of climate science in a single lifetime.
No, there's a lot under the umbrella, you know, and we work as best we can together. But you're right, it's not just about like, oh, you know, the climate scientists, this is what we agree. I mean, it's over all the disciplines that are related, and even you know, physicists. We work with physicists. One of the things that got me into climate science in the first place. It's not, yeah, there's so much involved, and it is a consensus. And to go back to what you were saying about you know, having to put all the data together, it's almost like it's like when you have evidence in police custody, it has to go through a certain chain of evidence. It has to be very specific. But not only that, when it comes to science, and especially really honest scientists, stuff that we mess up, that we know that the data is going to be off, we're still going to put it into our reports and our papers, and we're going to explain, well, this is why the data is off. We don't just, you know, ignore it and use whatever biased science we have that's going to fit our narrative. It's the other way around. We try to disprove ourselves all the time, but that's how we find.
Well, that's kind of how science works, right? Like, you propose a hypothesis and you set out to prove yourself wrong. Like, that's, you know, there are some dishonest people who can do all kinds of magic with statistics, and that's one of the first things you learn. Like, when you go onto any STEM track, you better take statistics, otherwise you ain't gonna be able to read anything. Yeah. But like, you know, which is part of the reason why, you know, some of these open source journals, when people start to cite these sort of disingenuous articles that are in places, maybe not PLOS One, because PLOS One is actually peer reviewed, but there's a number of BS sort of open source quote unquote journals where people can upload an essay as a paper. Mm-hmm. And you learn very quickly how to spot that kind of data magic where people who are setting out to prove themselves right will fuck with the data and remove stuff and all kinds of things, and you can pick it up pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then especially when you work with data all the time, or you write these papers all the time, anybody in the science community that's ever even had to write a thesis will be able to look at something like that and be like, okay, this is leaning a little bit toward too much of what they wanted to, as opposed to following the numbers only. We don't care about what our opinions are. We don't care about what we want the answer to be. You know, we care about what is absolutely the truth. And that is it. End of story. So,
well, and that's another thing. Like, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, because again, like I've mentioned to you, like in the background of our discussion, like after Math Pigs thing, where I came in for one game and hung out for a bit. Like, I didn't get a chance to finish my degree due to health conditions and a whole bunch of other shit that happened. Like, it's a big, complicated fucking thing. I have gotten to do some volunteer work and other stuff, so I've been in a lab. I've done a lot of this stuff. You know, I have enough education to have conversations about the field that I was studying. But, you know, I can't claim I've got a master's in blah, 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 because I got about halfway through basically residency. Part of the requirement for our degree was we had to put in 1,200 hours of residency. And then I got sick. And there was shit that happened while I was sick that I just decided not to fight in court. And we ended up, you know, I ended up leaving the institution and records were purged and shit happened. But, like, you know, coming back to that, like, I've often said that one of the things that you are taught when you go into any kind of STEM is that science, although we like to say that science is the pursuit of truth, science doesn't deal in absolutes. It deals in most likely explanations. It deals in falsifiables, and it deals in, you know, the most accurate, repeatable results. That is not the same thing as saying this is absolutely true. You know, would you, like, religion deals in absolutes, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even, I mean, and I will grant that, but when it comes to climate science, there are, I mean, it's just undeniable evidence, at least if you look at how the planet has heated up over the past 60 to 70 years. I mean, it's pretty undeniable science. I would say it doesn't, I would totally agree with you, Ali, but people that look at the science of climate change, especially when you look at the heat signatures and you just outright deny it, I mean, it's you got to go to a special place to do that, really.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't quite done with what I was saying there.
I haven't spoken in a while, so I thought I'd jump in.
Okay. So I think that that's also a misnomer, though, because when people say this paper proves this, or, new paper proves blah, 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 like chocolate is good for you, my particular field, a hoax that happened to prove how fucked up certain pay-to-play journals are, that's not necessarily what's going on, but I think that nuance can also, make it difficult to have conversations like what Nock just said. One can say the science is, the evidence is overwhelming and undeniable, but it still isn't an absolute 100% truth to any particular thing that is being said. Do you want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
I mean, science, I don't want to say science is always evolving, because it's hard to distinguish between what is science as in what we observe and what we do. And
science is always learning. I think that's how my brother always put it. Science is always learning. It's always getting better, and it's always finding new shit.
Well, I think the way my geology professor put it was brilliant. And he said, our knowledge is always evolving through the methodology of science. Basically, science is the methodology, period, but it's our knowledge that's always evolving. The things that come out of that methodology are always changing.
Yeah.
No, humans have always utilized science. It was our handmade tools to begin with, but it's always what made us stronger as a species and allowed us to dominate this planet.
I mean, you're right. Even as far back as our history takes us, the most rudimentary of science is just I push this boulder down a hill and it will keep going until it's stopped or until it gets to the bottom of the hill, as long as there's a certain incline, and being able to observe things. But we, for a long time, there was what we wanted to learn, and then we took God and filled in those gaps. And I think within time that gap has kind of slowly gone away, and we've realized that we don't necessarily need to fill in those things, that we know eventually we will be able to find the answers. We will be able to get those explanations. But like I say, it's hard to explain, because there is a certain amount that we understand and chase, but at the same time, gravity will always be gravity, and our universe will always work in the dimensions that we know in a certain way.
It's just our explanations become more accurate as we test them more.
Well, and even Christians, because I kind of lurk in Discord servers sometimes if I'm taking a break from editing a video or something. I saw some Christians the other day talking about, I don't understand how atheists can be atheists, because Christianity provides all the answers and atheism doesn't provide any, or science doesn't provide the answers. And the truth of that statement is Christianity provides very easy answers and allows you to be lazy and not look for the truth. Just because they're answers doesn't mean they're true ones.
No, they're not even really answers. They're non-answers.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't need an answer, because magic and God. And like I said, those gaps have filled in, whereas, science will always be science, but it does evolve, and we do learn new things. And we get, as scientists versus the theist community, we get in trouble for that a lot, because they'll say, well, your theory changed in this way. Now you mean this. And well, no, the science was always this. We just saw it differently, or we understood it differently, or we came to a different conclusion.
Well, it's like people who try to tell me that ADHD didn't exist until the 1990s. No, it's one of the most well-researched, psychological disorders in all of history, but it's gone by a bunch of different names. Like, they've changed the classification for it as the DSM has evolved over time. You get something very similar with various, bits of climate science, with various bits of almost any type of science that you can think of. For a long time, we thought of Newton's laws as being core to physics, and then relativity kind of turned a lot of that stuff on its head, and then quantum mechanics went and turned relativity on its head, and we're still trying to get the two to mesh up. So I mean, those fundamental ways that the universe runs still run that way, whether we understand them or not, but our explanations and understandings can only get more refined and more accurate as we continue to test them.
Exactly. So with climate science, we started, the very early stages of climate science, we didn't even call it climate change. It was global warming. And that is a highly inaccurate way to describe what is happening to this planet, because it's not just, I mean, yes, our global temperature is rising, something that is observable. The past 17 years have been the hottest years consecutively on record. We can see that, but we also see stuff like the deep freeze in the Midwest last year. We see extreme weather events. We see
well, and those extreme weather events, they're more likely because of differentials between the northern and southern hemispheres and like hotspot points and other things, right? Like part of it is just that because the greenhouse gases are trapping heat in specific areas, we're kind of getting shifts in the way that a lot of those like I'm trying to remember what the actual term that was used for the last person I talked about this was, but it was basically like a lot of the various air streams and currents are getting shifted because of the way that heat is accumulating in certain areas.
Yeah, I was going to say the extreme weather events for the most part has to do with ocean currents. Between the change of temperature of the oceans, which, while not as big of a shift as we have as the change in the temperature of the air, there is a change in the oceans. There's the desalination of oceans. You're dumping more water in from the land, because not only are glaciers and ice caps melting, but the stuff in the water itself, like icebergs and whatnot, are melting at a very rapid rate. Which doesn't change the ocean level, it does change the amount of salt that is accumulated in the ocean.
Yeah, the salt content.
So when that happens, when you change the salt contents of the ocean, you change the pH of the ocean, which affects different microbes and areas along where the currents run. And the currents themselves, the current, it does everything on the planet in terms of the temperature of the land, of different types of weather events, of the extreme weather events. The more that you fuck up the currents, you completely shift everything on Earth. So.
Well, and I mean, even the difficulty that you're having, you literally do this for a living, and even the difficulty you're having in explaining the magnitude of all of these changes that are occurring all at once, you have that on top of the burning Amazon, which itself is a massive sort of accumulation, a hotspot for things like precipitation. A lot of the weather in, say, the entirety of the northern hemisphere originates from that particular area. The more we have a reduction in the biodiversity there, the bigger of a problem we're going to have. You pair that with the fact that the oceans also produce a great deal of oxygen and were part of what was consuming a great deal of the greenhouse gases. When you upset those ecosystems, you get mass death of critters that are in there that are essential for those sorts of things. Like, it just shows how huge the level of scientific understanding you have to have in order to even begin to talk about this actually is. So it makes sense why a layperson would have a hard time, like, hey, it snowed yesterday, why, what the fuck is this liberal from New York talking about when they're talking about global warming.
Well, yeah, and it's real easy to be like, just sitting at your home and like, who gives a fuck about the pH levels of the ocean? How does that affect me? And well, because it changes the acidity of the ocean, and that affects the coral reefs. You have entire habitats dying along the coasts all over the world. I mean, I think it's really, really bad off the coast of California right now. And we're already seeing the effects of that, and it's just starting. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the warmer the planet continues to get, the worse those weather conditions are going to continue to get, right? And it's going to get really, really crazy.
That's why in the past, not even decade, we've seen just a ridiculous jump in the amount and the size of hurricanes and the hurricane season itself. If you recall the 90s or early 2000s, we didn't have hurricanes that were, completely destroy, maybe one or two every 5 years or so, we would get a hurricane devastating enough to, do something like it did in Puerto Rico a couple of years ago, or Katrina back in 2005. That was really the start. A lot of us see is once Katrina started, we noticed that pretty much every hurricane season so far, there has been at least one just super devastating hurricane that
Yeah.
its magnitudes more than we've seen in decades. So
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up because hurricanes, they've always been around, but they
mhm.
used to be a lot smaller. Like if you look at photographs of, say, Hurricane Andrew compared to a hurricane like even Hugo, which I remember as a child came through and just ripped our whole community up in North Carolina. The massive scale of Hurricane Andrew compared to Hugo is scary. I mean, it's really, really, I mean, it's just massive.
Well, and I mean, even tornadoes are getting worse in some areas. Tornadoes are getting bigger. And you have, like, up here, we have something a little more mild, I think, than what you guys are dealing with, but it's going to become a major problem very soon. And that is we're not getting the precipitation in the mountains that we need in order to maintain the snow cap that we need to maintain the rivers and the lakes and the streams, not just for the salmon, which are a huge part of Washington's economy, but also, for just even the drinking water supplies for a lot of people all over the state.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like the evidence is it's right there and it's affecting you directly. You just might not understand that that's what's going on.
And that's another really big issue is that we're talking about, for the most part, I mean, yeah, you have the hurricanes that are huge, and then you have, the temperatures are obviously warmer every summer, but for the most part, there are these really minuscule changes that, especially as humans who, get our food and our drinking water and live, wherever we need and whenever we need, and we live indoors, we don't see uh, we don't see big changes that are causing huge changes to us personally. However, like what you mentioned with the salmon, you're talking about decreasing one species, and within a food web that ends up causing a domino effect, and
Hmm.
it affects everything from what eats the salmon to what the salmon eat to the flora within the water. It's just because the salmon aren't eating the flora that they eat, that it's not culling it, and it's overgrowing, and other species are hurt because of it. So
And and that's the most important part, in my opinion, is the ecosystems that are damaged from that. But if just even thinking it from a human level, you like there's whole fishing industries here in Michigan designed around the salmon run. My brother goes every single year. One of these years I might actually go with him if I can get my ass away from this computer. But I mean, there are industries surrounded around that, so that will affect humans even if you don't know them. Their whole livelihoods center around that time of year, and it would be gone.
yeah.
Well, and I think part of the reason I specifically brought up salmon is my tribe considers ourselves to be people of the salmon. And that's another really big thing is the way that indigenous cultures are hit. People like to forget that there are still many indigenous practices that are not only encouraged, but flourish. Like a lot of indigenous cultures, survive off of the remnants of certain like sustainable logging industries, or, there are people that I know who the vast majority of the meat they eat is meat that they themselves catch, my uncle being one of them. He gets his fishing and hunting allowance from the state, and he gets that every year, and that's all he eats is the stuff that he catches himself. And so, that's going to be less and less. Like you hunters and fishermen and family members that are hunters and fishermen, you're going to lose that.
Mhm.
So that sort of
And that's just like the minimal things, because I mean we're already experiencing like mass extinctions on a severe level. I mean, something as small as the bee is endangered, and that thing goes. I mean, you want to talk about ecosystems raining havoc, you know? So, I mean, it's the smallest things matter in this conversation. And whether you believe it's human made or not, that doesn't even matter. It's
Doesn't matter.
happening. It's happening. And we all should be smart enough to do something about it.
You mentioned extinctions. We believe we're on what is a mass extinction level event now. In fact, the sixth in our planet's
Yeah.
history.
Yeah. I think we're there now.
Yeah, I mean, most people believe we're either it started or we're on the precipice of. It depends on who you talk to and what the data is. But no, I mean, species go extinct all the time. I mean, every year we lose tens, dozens even, but it's just something that happens on the planet. But right now, the level of extinction that we're the level of plants and animals that are both becoming endangered and becoming extinct are on such a massive scale that we can call it a mass extinction level event. And considering the how long this planet has been around, how long life on this planet has been around, and this is only our sixth one. It's a big deal. And the fact is that everyone before that, it was some kind of natural disaster.
Technically one could call what we're doing a natural disaster. It's just that the actions of this particular species are what's causing it. Instead of like something from space colliding into us, which is what 3 out of the 5, if I recall correctly, is a space rock hitting the Earth, and something fucked up happened because of it. I know that they said the Permian and the Ordovician were that, and everybody knows the Jurassic Cretaceous was that, or the Cretaceous Paleogene was that.
Well, yeah, along with volcanic activity as well, or there's changes.
The Jurassic Triassic was the volcanic one, right? Like the one we know for certain was volcanic activity.
Yeah, I don't know if that was it. I just know one of them was. I don't remember the eras exactly which one was which, but no. But
sorry, that's paleontology.
That's okay. I do know. Some paleontology, it goes along with the geology. I mean, like you said, when learning climate science, we learn fucking everything pretty much. So it's a lot of stuff crammed into one, and it's just sometimes it's hard to remember every single thing.
Well, I mean, like that's part of the problem is the lay public almost expects you to be like this magic super expert somehow. And first off, no individual human can answer every single question, but yeah. Second, like this gives us, I think, a great transition into now that we're talking how this affects y'all, like how, you said that you have some fairly big criticisms about the way the current administration is handling this stuff. I mean, I know that even prior to the pandemic, the EPA was getting pretty heavily dismantled, and that's an institution that was put in place by fucking Nixon, because at one point this was considered a bipartisan problem.
Yeah. I mean, look who... I can't remember who Trump appointed as the head of the EPA to begin with, but he was an oil man. I mean, it just started out right out the gate. Trump made it very clear that he could not give a fuck about the environment at all.
You're hitting a personal sore spot with me. I was at No Dapple for 3 days. At the end of it, I covered it on my YouTube channel. I still cover it now. I think it was within the first week of his presidency, right, that he signed that executive order, just full pipelines ahead, right?
Yeah. When he started off his, I don't remember if it was before or after he became president, but he just came right out and said, well, it's a Chinese. I don't know why he always has to make it racist, but
yeah, he's hated the Chinese from the get.
Yeah. But honestly, as stupid as I believe Trump is, I don't really think that he believes that climate change is a hoax. I think that he knows, he sees it. He's not that dumb, but he's got to play along. He knows, he's got.
Oh yeah, we know for a fact he knows it's not a hoax. Sorry to interrupt you, Mama.
No, it's okay.
But he totally renovated his estates and golf courses in Scotland to protect from climate change. So he knows it's not a hoax.
Yeah, you did.
Well, and I think that's an interesting point, though, that you brought up there. With that, he renovated his stuff. I think a lot of climate deniers do so in order to protect short-term monetary interests rather than out of a genuine disbelief. Like, I think that a lot of lay people genuinely disbelieve in it because they're fed misinformation. But this sounds a bit conspiratorial, but given the evidence that, not just presented, and a lot of evidence that, for example, even the military has a climate change task force that specifically exists to, look at how that will affect global security going into the future. It's quite obvious that it's real and that the so-called elites know that it's real, if you want to use that sort of dog whistly-ish term, but that a lot of them have business interests, particularly think of people like the Bushes who have a lot of investment in oil. Well, the oil and gas industries are going to be one of the first hit.
Yeah. In terms, I mean, I hate lobbyists. I really, really hate lobbyists, but especially like gun lobbyists and oil lobbyists. And there's it's well over 30% of the biggest lobbyists in DC are big oil lobbyists. They have vast amounts of money,
and they provide a revolving door for senators that vote for the policies they want them to vote for as well. Senators leave Congress and they become a lobbyist for the oil companies, making hundreds of $1,000s a year doing absolutely nothing but talking to their old buddies in Congress.
Mm-hmm. And one of Trump's platforms was let's bring back coal, and it was like, well, what the fuck is the point of that? I mean, aside from the fact that it just financially doesn't make any sense.
It was to appeal to the voting base. Oh, we're getting some echo off of on you, I think, Momma Atheist. I don't know if it's you or not. Yeah, I'm not hearing it now, so I think there might be some kind of echo. Do you have headphones or something?
It's usually just at first, I think, so it's not really too bad. It
looks like she's grabbing some headphones.
But this is an issue dear to my heart because of the whole, this like people don't realize fossil fuels are everything almost. So we've got to change like everything, and we have the technology to change everything. We could have smart houses, we could have smart businesses that are energy green, and it's just the cost of redoing all of that infrastructure is really, really high. But if we committed to it, we could really change the face of the world just by being an example. Right now, we're not. I believe China and Germany are actually leading in green technology. Now, China has some issues with their pollution. There's no freaking doubt.
Well, and I think that, like, that's the thing that I was trying to get at. Like, him promising to open up coal again had one purpose, and that was that he knew that in a lot of contended states, there were a lot of one-horse towns, for lack of a better way to put it. The equivalent of, say, railroad towns. There are a lot of mining towns that had the coal mine, and when the coal mine died, the town started to dry up, and that had a lot of his, for lack of a better way to put it, boomer base living in those towns that really want to see those mines open back up again. And so he was appealing to that subset to try to get them to come to the polls, because they are known not to vote very much. They're known not to trust government. And so basically what he did was he went, I'm going to call you guys out, and they went, we're recognized, we are now your people. And he effectively created a cult out of that.
Yeah, and one of the first things he did was allow coal companies to dump their fucking waste into rivers. I mean, and you, if you haven't seen it, I would suggest you look it up. It's very interesting what they're putting in our fucking water sources.
Yeah. In fact, some of the laws that he's rolled back have been about being able to dump toxins into water and stuff like that. But not in terms of what you were saying before about infrastructure, I think as a country, that is our biggest issue. To change over to alternative energies, it's a possibility, and yes, it will take money, but it is about jumping over that hurdle and being able to move from the fossil fuel industry into using the infrastructure and building the infrastructure we need for alternative energies. And I think one of the biggest issues being that we are such a big country, and that requires a lot of effort on our part. However,
I mean, it would be really, really massive on our part. And people ridicule AOC for her Green New Deal, and there's some things in there that probably should be ridiculed, because to get anything into Congress, you have to put some pork in there. But it's like the closest thing we've ever came to what we need to do, and it doesn't even come close enough. Like, I've seen models where you could have walkways over interstates so the wildlife can actually cross and not get destroyed by humans and driving at 70 miles an hour. But that it would require a huge commitment from everybody understanding how dire the circumstances are.
When it comes to something like, appealing to the, the people in the coal mining towns and stuff like that, or the people in the industry themselves, the people that mine the coal, the people that pump the tar sands and all of it, what we've always talked about in the community or in the field itself is there really is not a big difference in terms of their jobs now and being able to train them to work, to build solar panels, to build a solar field, to be able to build turbines and stuff like that. It's not. We're not talking about people that are going, I'm not trying to sound like a snob or anything, but these aren't people that have their degrees to go mine coal. These are people that are blue collar workers that could very easily learn this new trade and be able to switch over from one to the other. And not only that, but it's also, healthier for them.
They want to, like, they understand the risks to their health. Richard, I believe his name was Richard Ioza. No, I'm thinking of a friend of mine actually. But there was this congressman that I followed, or he tried to run for Senate recently. Just real firebrand ex-Marine guy from West Virginia, from coal country. And I watched a lot of his stuff, and I watched a lot of documentaries of this one really liberal kid in West Virginia coal country that was really trying to tell people, just talking to them about the coal industry and all of the adverse health effects. And they all have people that have died in their families. The graveyards are full of them. And they all want to get out of it. They just want to be assured that they're still going to be able to work, because that has been their lifeblood for over 100 years at least. So
well, and
once we can assure that to them, they're down for it. The problem is no one's ever really actually assured it to them. They've promised and they've never came through. And then Trump comes along and promises them, hey, we're just going to make this the industry again, even though that's not even feasible in the modern world.
It's not even about him promising that. It's him turning it completely on his head and say, the liberals don't want you to have a job, and they want to put you out of job, and they want to ruin your lives, and they want to ruin this country with green energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Bullshit. When you stir it up like that, you end up with people that keep creeping toward the far right.
Yeah, and even Hillary Clinton's plan was to turn West Virginia into like the mecca of green energy and train all of those workers into actually the green energy technology field. And that would have been the mecca, but they just never got that information. They were just told, hey, they're trying to take your jobs.
Well, and I think that part of the problem, again, is also that change is scary, and that, Trump saying, let's reopen the mine. Well, that's something you can snap your fingers and relatively do. It's a couple of pieces of equipment, the infrastructure is already there. It's just a matter of going back to work, so to speak, versus something like, if you're talking about green energy, that's years and years worth of infrastructure, manufacture, building, all kinds of stuff. Some of it's even theoretical research, like out in, like when I did my climate change episode with Progressive Liberal, we talked about the liquid salt, like the liquid sodium solar plant that's down in Nevada, that like it can hold on to solar energy for up to 12 hours using liquefied salt that effectively releases heat, boils water, turns a turbine, and it can power the city of Las Vegas for up to 3 days just on the storage of energy that it can accumulate. Stuff like that is still in its earliest stages in terms of research, but it's incredibly promising. A lot of people are afraid of what's new. They know coal mining. They don't know how long it's going to take for this newfangled, shiny factory to get built that maybe might have something to do with a turbine.
Yeah, there's here in Michigan, we're looking at a new green concrete. It's brand new. Nobody's really sure if it's going to be as good as the old stuff, but it's supposed to be, and it's supposed to be really energy efficient and supposedly last longer. And Michigan has terrible roads. But yeah, it's brand new. We are literally behind the field. Like, we should be researching this, but unfortunately we're just not putting too much energy into it since Obama's been gone.
And one of the biggest issues as well isn't just that people don't know. There's, because of the lobbyists and because of the fossil fuel industry, there is a shit ton of misinformation purposefully done. I live in the South. Unfortunately, you can tell by my accent I'm not from here, but I moved here a few years ago, and I want to say Alabama or Louisiana a few years ago, there was talk about putting in a solar field, which is just a big open field with panels that would collect sunlight and be able to use that as its own sort of power plant. And people in the town voted against it. And when asked, many people said that they were afraid that these solar panels would steal all the sunlight from the town. I mean, how is this is just beyond stupid. It doesn't make any sense. But you can't think that people are that stupid. But then you look back and you find stuff on the internet. Hi, Jeff. You find stuff on the internet that say things like, not necessarily come out and say, oh, they're gonna steal your sunlight. You're not gonna have any sunlight in town, but kind of guide people toward that way of thought. And
I think that brings up another good point, because I see a lot of people call people stupid, and I've even done this once or twice, but I don't think it's stupidity. I think, and this is where I got into a debate the other day about free will and all that stuff, so I can go kind of into that, but people only have access to the information they have access to. One could argue that the internet supposedly makes access to all information available, but the truth is, if you grow up in a particular mindset, if you're put into a particular mindset, especially by your friend community, and deviating that could potentially get you socially ostracized and other things, you are put into a position where not only does Google get stacked to where the information you're going to get is going to be stuff that reinforces your worldview, but on top of that, there's also social punishment for beginning to show any sign of dissent whatsoever, which is why a lot of people who say leave religious cults might do so mentally and find a community online or something and hide that presence before actually, say, leaving publicly in any way, shape, or form. So I don't think people are stupid. I think people are undereducated. And I think that the idea of climate science, like we said when we opened the show up, is so huge and so vast and so terrifying and so overwhelming that most people, it's easy to look out their window and say, this politician noted that it's snowing outside, global warming is bunk, then think about climate change as this vast interconnected web of things that even if they spent their entire life studying it, they might just barely be able to scratch the surface. Science in that way, I think, is terrifying for a lot of people who are not, already heavily educated in it, and scientific education in this country is pretty subpar. Scientific literacy is pretty subpar.
I'm going to agree and disagree. So ignorance is not stupidity, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. Ignorance is hard to defeat, but it's not stupidity, it's just ignorance. But there's an issue when I think roughly 47% of the country consider themselves evangelical Christians, and they think that God's going to fix it, or God has a plan and this is God's plan, or, the end can come tomorrow. So they don't really, and then not to mention, the religious war on science raged bloody and hot at some points of our history. So I think people are fundamentally indoctrinated not to believe the science sometimes, or don't care to believe the science because God, or the Christian God to specify. I'm not talking about all gods, but mainly here in America, 47% of the country identifies as evangelical Christians.
Mm-hmm. And I've had discussions with people who have told me, well, climate change is the will of God, and so be it. This is the direction we're going. This is what God wants. And that's ridiculous. If your kid was sick, would you just be like, well, God made my kid sick, I'm going to let them die?
The answer to that question is yes for some people, particularly if you're talking about, say, Jehovah's Witnesses, who won't even get life-changing blood transfusions, or anti-vaxxers who think that, if you're going to survive a childhood illness, you're going to survive it, not thinking about, well, every single person who doesn't get a vaccine who gets infected, it might mutate, and then our vaccines may become ineffective.
Mm-hmm. And you look at AOC's Green New Deal, and in terms of and going back to misinformation, it was like right out of the gate, as soon as even the Green New Deal was brought up, it was, look how ridiculous this is, and they said, oh well, we can't fly in planes anymore, and we can't eat
Yeah, you can't
hamburgers
fly no
anymore.
more. Oh my
And
God.
it's just not, that's not the case. I mean, in terms of like, I don't want to go on about it because there's the Green New Deal is so dense, but we talk about just the not eating hamburgers anymore. We're not talking about even getting rid of meat altogether. We're talking about just locally sourcing our food, because a huge problem that we have with pollution is just the food that we ship from one point in the country to the other, and it would make such a huge difference if we were to locally source our food, if we were to get our fruits and vegetables and our meats from close by, and that's part of what the Green New Deal was talking about. But
well, and I think there's another aspect to it too. And this nutrition is the background that that I was going into. And one of the things that we learned about was the FDA is basically at the same time as being kind of the organization that sets the nutritional standards for the country. It's also a farmers advocacy group, kind of at the same time. Pseudo farmers union. Basically, they kind of exist to help figure out how much money farmers need. Like, if we stopped over subsidizing the meat industry and allowed meat to go up to the natural price that it would be, while still continuing to subsidize other more green forms of protein, such as legumes and such, that could also make a drastic difference in consumption without having to even resort that far, because it would be less profitable to ship things that far. Like, there are small changes in policy we can make, like that, although they'll have major impact for certain industries, like there will be, like, a lot of CAFOs will probably either be shut down or at least reduce their output. There's going to be a lot of big companies that, are going to lose some money, but like those are things we can do that can naturally sort of shift those things without even having to put, say, consumption caps or anything like that people are so scared of.
And society shifts, and a lot of these companies are multi-billionaire or multi-billion-dollar companies that spread across the world. I think they'll be fine, and I think they'll be able to adapt and sell something new that might be better for the planet.
Yeah. But you're right about being able to shift towards other forms of protein, but doing it in small increments. Like I said, being able to locally source meat and different types of meat, and Math Big mentioned in the chat lab grown meat, which it's the same exact thing, except we're not slaughtering the animals, and we're not having to worry about shipping, and we're not having to worry about the food. So much of our agriculture in America, so much of especially our corn and wheat is fed directly into the meats that we eat.
Well, yeah, it's such an inefficient form of protein. That's why I talked about decreasing the subsidies over time for that, just because.
I mean, this is where I always fail as a climate change advocate, because I am such a meat eater. I love me some bacon.
No,
well, a lot of people get pissy with me when I start talking about this because I am a vegetarian. I'm a vegetarian because I'm literally
You're gonna
allergic to mammal
summon David
meat.
Worley, Eliakai. David Worley is gonna come.
But like I'm a vegetarian because I'm allergic to mammal meat and because I get a lesser reaction from poultry. I can eat fish, but I don't. It's the only one that I don't eat for ethical reasons because of overfishing.
But I mean, there's no denial that our meat consumption has become a problem. It became part of our evolution as a species. I don't think there's a doubt about it. But at the same time, it's become a huge issue. We can address that issue without getting extreme about it. But just denying the issue has led to a lot of harm.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like even reducing your meat consumption or choosing, actively for right now to source it from local areas, to purchase it from places like farmers markets and such, if you can afford to do so. Now, this is also a very privileged argument to make because a lot of people can't afford, farmers markets are cheap if you're buying organic produce, but they're not all that cheap for some people, like if you're paying what actual produce is worth, because most of them are not on these subsidized mega farms. Most of them are actually like the prices that you'll get are a lot closer to the kind of prices that you'd pay if we weren't overly subsidizing our food production.
Yeah.
Well, I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that I have a lot of climate friends. So I don't know if you know, Mama, but like I've been in the active part of climate change. So I've been to 3 different oil pipeline protests. The Native American communities are on the front lines of those protests always. So it's kind of a cultural thing when I do it. It gives me a chance to meet people, but it's something that I've always believed in pretty much since I left conservative republicanism and became a liberal. And then slowly, I've just went farther left as I've gotten older. But I've always been on the activist side of this, and we do try to concern ourselves with the science, but it's never been our main priority. When you speak of oil companies being cruel, they do it on a level like you can't imagine. We highly suspect the oil companies of planting people in the No Dapple protest to rape indigenous women, to turn the Native Americans against white people that were joining the protest. I mean, we are talking about very, very dirty tactics that they use.
I think, I've been working not with, but up against the fossil fuel industry for a long time now. And honestly, I don't know a dirtier industry than the shit that they pull. You're absolutely right.
Did you ever see that old movie, There Will Be Blood?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of shaped me on this issue, just seeing, and it's based on a true story, but it's Hollywood. So I'm not saying go look at this movie. That's how it was. But I think it does portray a very accurate depiction of how the oil industry became what it is now. And they haven't changed much.
Yeah. Because, I mean, it was such a gold mine to begin with. Once human beings realized what they could do with fossil fuels, it was right out the gate. Everything became about fossil fuels, and it was so necessary and so needed. And
yeah, our industrial revolution. I mean, it fueled it. It's why it happened.
Exactly.
But I mean, it's not even just companies. There are entire countries. I mean, there are entire countries that their entire economies are solely based on oil. Just about. You take oil out of certain countries' economies and they are completely fucked. And you get a lot of that in the Middle East. That's where a lot of those oil wars and stuff come from. But also Russia. Russia is very dependent on oil for their economy. They don't like to admit it, but that's the vast majority of what they even have. They trade in oil and they trade in secrets, and those are the 2 things that they can sell on the world stage. So, I mean, this goes really deep into, what it means to be human and what it means to have a livelihood and what capitalism and such ultimately means for the human condition. I think there are some things that we need to kind of recognize when it comes to pursuing profits and stuff. At what point do we need to stop looking at profits and start looking at, those countries are also located in areas that are going to be the most affected by climate change as well. The entire middle part of the, from the equator up till what I think 20 degrees up or so will become uninhabitable in 50 years at our current rate.
Yeah, and I was lucky because I had a chance to talk to Maddie. She's a nuclear scientist. I'm going to try to get her back on the channel because I as an activist, one thing that really just kept going around every protest I went to, or every really climate person I would talk to, that it would take 30 years to move our nuclear power plants from off the coasts, and if they get swallowed up by the oceans, which is in some models, that just would be devastating. And I talked to Maddie, and she's like, "Oh, that's not an issue. We can move that shit in a week." Maybe it would have been an issue 20 years ago, but it's not an issue anymore. So I mean, it's actually talking to the scientists that are in the fields. I mean, that's just the best way to actually learn about something if you can. If not, the great thing about this age we live in is they're all talking to you. If you're listening, you just got to find them. This great internet age.
Yeah. And I just wanted to go back to what Trump is doing too, though, because
because there's so much more. Yeah, so please go.
Yeah. But there was something that kind of tied into the COVID thing. So if I could just get around to it, it's going to take a second. But
go for it.
So yeah, like I said, right, he fought against climate change, or fought against fighting against climate change from the very beginning. I think some of it, not maybe like 80% of it, was about the money. Him and his Kushner, his son-in-law, actually have he has companies that he's invested in that work with work in the fossil fuel industry. But there's a percentage of it too, though, that had to do with, there's so much of what Trump does that is just fuck you to Obama. And I think that was my only real explanation for what he did with Paris, because I just couldn't wrap my head around, you've got every country on the planet other than two that were signed on to the Paris Climate Agreement, and Trump was like, nah, fucking I'm out. And I mean, it did take a year once he like announced pulling out, and then it was like maybe 6 months ago or something like that we were actually fully pulled out. But it just there wasn't a whole lot of sense. Yeah, there are things that each country has to hold to in order to be in the Paris deal, but it just felt really disingenuous to me. This was a big deal to Obama. And climate, although at the beginning, as much as I loved Obama, he could have done a lot more, especially near the beginning. It took him a while to kind of come around the bend in order to fight against climate change. But when Obama signed signed us into Paris, it was a legacy maker for him. And as soon as he could, Trump pulled us out of that. And there are a lot of things that, like I said, especially toward the end of his administration, that Obama passed, especially with both Clean Air and Clean Water Acts. And Trump has done his damnedest to pull us out, mm-hmm. and to roll back these changes. There are laws that he's tried to put into place so that we could drill in national forest or national parks, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. I was gonna bring that up. Yeah, he's literally saying he wants to take the minerals from national forests. A lot of that land is treaty land of Native American peoples. So it's atrocious, like what he's proposing.
Yeah, he does not. It's not just the national, but he does not give a fuck about the Native people at all. Like, he doesn't acknowledge them, but he just fucks them over constantly.
Oh no, he acknowledges us. Oh no, he acknowledges us. He just fucking hates us. Like, there's a number of Native American news outlets that covered this, but he actually had, as one of his interview questions for potential candidates when he was selecting for the Supreme Court, like, one of his questions had to do with tribal sovereignty. He wants to strip tribal sovereignty. And one of the first things that administration did when he replaced people in the BIA was to strip the land rights from the Mashpee Wampanoag.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I'm sorry. But
yeah, that officially went through, but that case has been going on for over 2 years. And as of a couple of months ago, the Mashpee Wampanoag no longer have rights to their land.
Yeah, he's atrocious on this issue all around. So, like, when you talk about the Paris Climate Agreement, that was an agreement that the entire world came to. It was an agreement that didn't go far enough, but it was a start. The planet was recognizing this, and you're right. He hates Barack Obama. It's not like, he wants to be better than Barack Obama was. That's not it. He hates him. And you can just see it. It's evident. And it shows you, like, what they elected, what they put into the highest power. And it has been destruction. Like, we cannot sit here in a 2-hour stream and tell you everything Donald Trump has done when it comes to the environment and the catastrophe of climate change. Like, he has set us back so far. And that's why I say, like, even though Joe Biden is clearly showing dementia, you gotta vote for him, because Trump is fucking dangerous.
Well, and it's part of it is the fact that what he did was he put a bunch of his friends in power. It is unprecedented, the sheer number of people with no experience in their fields that he put in charge of specific areas, like, all throughout the government for basically the purposes of deregulating and dismantling it. Like, the amount of damage this administration has done like alone. It's going to take multiple presidencies to fucking clean up. Like, it is very easy to destroy. It is hard to build, but it is damn easy to destroy.
Yeah, and he's he's stacked the courts in order to get the laws he's wanted passed. Luckily, with a lot of these environmental rollbacks that he has attempted to put into place, even though they're out there, a lot of judges have not passed them yet. They've stopped in their tracks and said, no, this is a little too fucked up. Even some of the conservative judges find it to be pretty bad, especially with what I was trying to get to, putting it, connecting it with the COVID thing, is that right now, as of a couple days ago, he is again trying to roll back auto emissions because he feels that his reasoning is that that cars that pollute more will be cheaper and therefore will put more into the economy. So that is literally what he's saying. So right now they're attempting to roll back auto emission standards that it has taken decades to.
That sounds like a fucking stretch. I mean, and also like the emissions and shit, like coming back to COVID, like that's going to cause lung damage over the long term. That's going to make it harder to deal with things like lung infections. That is not a good idea.
Oh, no, of course it's not a good idea. And his, like I said, his reasoning is bullshit anyway. It's all just about, him being in the pocket of big oil, him fucking over Obama, and it's just overall like him absolutely hating on the environment.
Yeah.
He did, however, I can't remember, it was a summit he had in, I want to say in the UK not that long ago. He did say that climate change was real and it was a problem. That was the first time I had ever heard him admit it. He did backtrack on that a couple of days later, and he said shit on Twitter or whatever about it. But he did finally admit to it actually being real, which I don't understand how that didn't harm his credibility with his base.
He was on coke that day.
Oh,
because his credibility.
The first video I ever made that went over 1,000 views was on my old channel way back in the day, and it was Donald Trump was high on cocaine in the second debate.
Well, and
sweat and shit. Oh my god, it's so obvious he's on some kind of fucking amphetamine or upper or something. It's very clear in the way his speech patterns are. He's
a New York business socialite from, like, you're talking like one of the richest men in New York City in the 80s, and you don't think that dude was, taking some totes?
Oh, absolutely. But for most of them, it stopped at some point. And I feel like it's not like, I feel like his doctors are shooting. Like, people make this joke that he's snorting like ADHD medicine. I don't think so. I think his doctor is actually shooting him up with stuff, to be honest with you. The way,
yeah, I don't honestly think he's still on it. I'm trolling. Sorry.
No, I get it, but I mean the way
I don't know if you can actually even snort Adderall. Like, I don't think you can do that.
I don't know. I think you can. I know somebody that does. Honestly, I work with a guy. He stays up for days and days. I'm like, dude, you're gonna kill yourself. He's like, no, I love it. And I'm like, man, I don't understand you.
I mean, he'll go from like barely being conscious and not being able to read a teleprompter and slurring his words to speaking a million miles a minute to also slurring his words, but in a completely different way, like an hour later. It's clear that it's either that or it's part of the dementia.
I have been corrected, by the way. Apparently, Dana's druggy friend, Dana is the ghost. Dana's druggy friend states that yes, one can absolutely snort Adderall.
You can snort anything. Trust me. My friends used to call me Mikey because I do anything.
But, I mean, I think I did want to make one other comment on how much he hates Native Americans, by the way. Like, you can't really say he doesn't acknowledge us when he went on this big, long campaign against Elizabeth Warren, calling her Pocahontas and then turning around and saying that most Native Americans, whenever he goes into any, like, reservation, they don't look Native American to me.
Yeah,
I don't know what they look like to you, but they don't look Native American to me.
I commented just a little bit in the chat about it. I didn't want to go on a rant about it because I will get worked the fuck up. But
Well,
If
I've
you don't
gotten that shit because my tribe is lighter skinned, so I get
Yeah,
fucking
a lot of
angry when
people
say that shit.
a lot of people just don't understand how insulting it is because they seen the bullshit Disney movie. But Pocahontas was a teenage girl that got kidnapped and raped for 9 months.
She
It's
wasn't
not.
even a teenager. She was 10 or
Yeah,
12.
yeah. I mean, yeah, she was like preteen. I mean, she was a young girl that got kidnapped and raped for 10 months, and the president of the United States is calling a sitting senator, who's actually fairly decent on climate change. Not the best, but I will accept her record as decent. That just to call her Pocahontas, it's just so insulting. I did a stream on it where I raged about it.
Well, and then he, like, when he was presenting the stuff to the code talkers, we call her Pocahontas. Oh, fucking awful.
Yeah.
I didn't mean like he doesn't acknowledge. Obviously, he's very disparaging and stuff towards Native Americans. I just mean in terms of like policy and things, he never,
Yeah.
he never talks about how, and he's going to do anything for the Native people. That's
Yeah,
what I meant by that.
Right now, and I promised people we're not going to Corona, maybe just a tad bit at the very end of it. But right now, like the Navajo reservation is pretty much in danger of extinction from coronavirus, and they are doing nothing. Nothing. It's going to be a future video on a Raging Atheist.
No, absolutely. I'm sorry, Al. I didn't mean it like. I didn't mean that he doesn't acknowledge. I just mean that he doesn't.
No, I understood what you were saying. He doesn't.
Yeah,
he doesn't acknowledge us. He doesn't give two fucks about us one bit. No, I completely understood what you were saying.
Well, I understood what you were saying too. Both Naki and I have indigenous blood, and this is something that I pop off about regularly. Like, indigenous issues are dear to my heart because I'm a half-breed. I'm a 50%
That's why I was
blood
trying
quantum.
not to go here because I commented in the chat because we will start raging.
Yeah, and again, like, nobody thought that you were saying anything wrong. We're both angry at Trump for the shit he has done to both of our people.
Yeah, but I mean, it's pales in comparison to the harm he's done to everybody. Just people don't know it, and the climate change issue is the number one issue. Like when I speak of the moment when he took away the no DAPO victory from us because we beat Obama on that issue, but Obama was really good on environment, and it was really hard for us to understand why he just didn't grant us the appeasement, why we had to fight for months and months and months to get it. Eventually, he did the right thing. Trump came in, just erased it. And the thing that people don't know about that is Donald Trump had direct financial connection to the mother parent company. He had stock in that company, and that's why he immediately allowed the easement without the environmental impact study. And I just made a video telling everybody that a federal judge just reversed that shit. And now the environmental impact study is going to go. We're trying to stop drilling. We're trying to stop production. It should be stopped. It's a fight right now.
Well, and that DAPL pipeline is already leaking. It's not leaking on reservation land yet, but it's already leaking out in the forest land.
It's leaked in several spots.
Yeah. Jared Whitaker says Trump hates all minorities. I don't know if you can call Russians a minority, but I don't think he hates Russians so much. But no, he goes after everybody.
There's a very deep bias when it comes to Native Americans, and it's not.
It's an old bias.
It's very, very old, and it's an issue that just stopped being talked about. It's why I do talk about it. But the thing that's good is they are on the front lines of this very issue right here. So it does tie in a little bit. But go on, Mama. I want to hear your thoughts. Like, we've got like 40 more minutes. Really trying not to talk about coronavirus. So.
No. It's true though, especially in terms of native lands. So much of the open country that we can either drill or put a pipeline through ends up being on native lands, and that's something that the administration has gone after a lot, and there's been huge fights about that, and that doesn't seem to resonate with people. People don't seem to really get between native lands and national parks and everything, the amount of damage that this administration alone wants to do. in order to procure fossil fuels or to even move fossil fuels to get there's tar sands in Canada and Alaska that are very expensive and can make this country a lot of money, but unfortunately that means putting pipelines down that completely destroys so much of the untouched land in our country. And it's something that he fights for behind the scenes. Like, he's not very vocal about getting this shit done. He gets it under the table. It gets it done under the table, like a lot of these environmental rollbacks. I will find even working in the industry, I don't always know, what did he fuck up today? What
Well, and it's crazy how many things you find. Like, there's this big controversy. Like, he'll say something really stupid on air, and while everybody's talking about that, you'll find some side news article that's like, oh, by the way, Trump passed this heinous thing.
Mhm.
Like, it's like he'll stir up controversies when these absolutely terrible things get passed, so that the media will be in a firestorm. Like, it's clearly deliberate.
And
it's
the underlying thing of it all is getting really right-wing judges into federal positions, and he has done it on a level no president has ever done it before. So he creates all these distractions, and you don't know that you got motherfucking Jerry Falwell Jr. as a Supreme Court for Alabama or wherever the fuck, like, I mean, it is that extreme right now, and nobody talks about it. The Young Turks do, but hardly anybody else that I've seen.
Yeah, and he will actually they brag about it. They're incredibly proud of the fact that they're turning over the federal judges in this country at such an exponential level. It's
really judges that will uphold Trump policy. It's scary.
It's not just that they're right-wing judges. They're not only extreme right-wing, but they're also, most of them are highly underqualified.
Yeah.
No right being there. I mean, look at the Supreme Court pick. This fucknut that has no right being a judge at all, let alone being a Supreme Court judge for the rest of his life, fucking sitting in front of Congress, crying about poor little old me. All these women are saying I tried to rape them, and crying about fucking beer and shit. How did we get to this? How did we get to the point where that was okay?
Because, I mean, they literally elected a president. I mean, this is no shit. He raped his first wife. It's well documented, paid her off. Now she literally says, hey, when I said rape before, that was before all the hundreds of millions he gave me, so it's not rape anymore. That's literally the story here. Walked into the Teen USA pageant dressing room, teenage girls in their underwear.
Grab them by the pussy.
At least 18 cases, serious, legitimate cases of sexual harassment. Two legitimate cases of rape, including one against a 16-year-old girl who still to this very day is screaming bloody murder, but he's president and nothing can be done.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is we're not talking about like one or two, and I never, I will always listen to, because you can't, it's hard to prove rape or something like that unless it just happens.
They're accusations, but he's president. You can't even investigate the shit anymore.
Yeah, but like I said, you're not talking about like one or two cases here and there. You're talking about dozens upon dozens of cases, and we're not talking about stuff like, oh, well, people that just came out of the woodwork now, or stuff that just happened now. We're talking about allegations that date back decades.
Yeah, I mean, this has been going on for a long time, and I misspoke. You can still investigate him. You just can't prosecute him until he's no longer president.
No, you can't. And but even so, depending on how long it's been since the alleged rape, you can't.
Yeah,
that's limitations.
That's another thing. If he wins re-election, there's a statute of limitations on a lot of the crimes he committed in his first term. There's so many different. I mean, this election is vital. I don't like Joe Biden. I don't, but like, there's no choice here.
No,
there's none.
There really isn't, and it's really gross. And to how can you sit there on the right side and just ignore this. I've had people say, well, you know,
But all
so he might have,
unborn babies.
yeah, so he abused some women or something. What do you mean? So he's the fucking president of our country. This is not it's not okay, and he openly admits it. And like you said, it was right after or right before he was elected.
Godless. I wanted to address Godless Scummer for 30 seconds. Godless Scummer, like, we have talked repeatedly about Old Hansy on this channel. Like, for a long time, Knock was heavily campaigning for Bernie, but, like, Biden definitely also has a shitload of fucking problems. It's just he isn't also backed by a party who is going to push him into doing some absolutely horrendous shit to the, you know, to the environment. We're definitely picking the lesser of two evils here. Like, nobody doubts that. Everybody in this chat acknowledges the allegations against Joe Biden. A lot of us fought against his nomination for that very reason.
Yeah, but it was either right, like I said, it was right before or right after he was elected. He was charged with raping, threatening, and beating a 16-year-old girl. This is on record. This happened, and it didn't. She ended up pulling. I think she might have even died. I can't remember if she died or the lawsuit was pulled out. But yeah, and it was. I had no idea. I read about this maybe a few months ago. I had no fucking clue. And this is our president. It's horrifying. But regardless of even what he does in his person, the Epstein stuff. I mean, he clearly had deep connections with Epstein. There's videotape of him at a party where him and Epstein are the only males there, and the rest of them are all scantily clad women, maybe prostitutes, people, you know, sex trafficked women. You know, it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and so it's not just, you know, him doing shitty things as a politician. The shit that he's gotten away with as a person. And people want to people elected him in the first place, let alone they want to reelect him. And I just don't get it. My parents, that's why I moved to Georgia. Both my parents are ill. My father has dementia, and my father has dementia. My mother has various ailments, including she had a stroke recently. So I take care of them, and they live in my house, and they watch Fox News. Fox News is pretty much on all day, and this isn't something that they did before Trump was elected. They weren't even that much into politics, but for some reason,
me too. I'm right with you. My dad is the same fucking way. For
some reason, when Trump was elected, you know, and my parents were, you know, I'm first generation American. I'm Dutch. My father's from Holland, and my mother's Irish, and they're growing up. They were just casually racist, you know, slightly so, like would say stuff like Asians are bad drivers or stuff like that. You know, nothing, I mean, it's shitty, but it's nothing like too horrible. Never said the N-word or anything like that. And now, like, the stuff they'll say about Mexicans and like the fact that they watch it all the time. And I listen to the things that they say on Fox, and it's just this level of hero worship that I have never seen, not just with them, but with the right and his base entirely. He literally can do no wrong.
It gets even worse. It gets even worse when you go to the talk radio and the Rush Limbaughs and the Sean Hannitys, and I mean, it's like I've always made it a point to listen to that because I've always understood that those are the propagandists, and like people fucking will die by Rush Limbaugh. Look, totally. I mean, he's not a racist. I'm like, do you not remember what he said about Donovan McNabb when he was the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles? And do you not remember he was a fucking junkie? Now, I used to be a junkie. So I'm not talking too much smack, but you're sitting here talking like he's like some messiah, and a lot of people actually look at him to be that. And Hannity's even more popular. And if you listen to Hannity, since Trump has become president, it has been conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory, deep state. Now even like everybody's talking about this fucking deep state as if the federal government's competent enough to have one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, anybody who's ever tried to do any sort of project management immediately doubts every conspiracy theory that requires anybody to shut their mouth about anything ever. Like, there's a reason why the second that somebody does something fishy in the government, we get fucking leakers. Like, people, it's kind of like coming back to, like, the faking the moon landing shit. Like, that's thousands of people you would have to silence all at fucking once for, almost 100 years. Like, no, you're fucking stupid if you think that is possible. Like, if you've ever tried to herd even a team of 12, you know how stupid that idea is. And I am going to use the word, like, that word, because it is a completely ridiculous fucking idea.
Please don't feel bad about calling stupid people, because idiots should know that they're idiots. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to be an idiot, but they should know they're a fucking idiot.
Well, and I mean, I know we said we weren't going to talk about COVID, but you brought up Fox News, so I have to remind everybody about this. Well, no, I mean, Momma Atheist was the one who brought up Fox News. Like, that fucking interview where the goddamn senator, I want to say it was a state senator, and the fucking Fox pundit, like, the elderly people should be able to choose to sacrifice themselves.
It wasn't a state senator. It was the lieutenant governor of Texas.
Oh, it was lieutenant governor. Okay.
Well, you tried to say that, he would do it. Well, first of all, he wouldn't. He would be stuck in his house. All
right, so why the fuck are you not out there doing it right now there, buddy? Go shake the hand of somebody who's got COVID so you can go,
there's a thing on the right about putting the elderly back to work to save the economy. I mean, I'm not making this up. This is shit they say. And it's atrocious. It's atrocious. I mean, and it ties into the climate change issue perfectly, because it's all about misinformation. I just actually made a new video about misinformation around the coronavirus and put it on Patreon, so that'll be on my channel soon. But I mean, misinformation is very, very dangerous. It's why the planet, there's a few reasons why the planet became the way it was. We grew very comfortable with our consumer society, and it's very hard to let it go. But it's either let it go. As much as I love doing this YouTube thing, it's either let it go, or we might not be here for long, or we might have to migrate to specific parts of land masses to save what we can. I mean, look at the climate change models. Don't deny it. Just research it. Don't take my word for it. Don't take Momma Atheist's word for it. Aaliyah Kai, any of the things. Like, go do your own research, please, and come here and tell us what you think.
So make sure you do your research from reputable sources. Don't go read Joe Schmo's blog on this shit.
Facebook is not a research source. So, I mean, please, people, just stop.
And neither is Blogspot.
And that's one of the issues, too, with, I don't want to shit all over the right, but it's true. The right and the people that watch Fox News is that they're not getting their information but from anywhere but from Fox, and they believe everything that they say. I know the people that the scientists I know, let alone the friends that I have and the people in the atheist community and whatnot. We look not only at independent sources, but multiple sources in order to find out what is actually the truth. When you have someone who is, someone talking to you from a TV station that is already biased, that is pretty much propagandic state TV, telling you, well, this is how it is, and that's it, and they believe it, and that's it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And sorry to bring it back to COVID again, but what Trump did.
Oh no, don't be sorry. We're near the end. We can talk about COVID.
Okay, starting the entire thing by saying it was a hoax for an entire month. He said it was a hoax. Okay, and now our numbers are high. We are the epicenter of the pandemic now. We have the highest rates because he fucked it up so bad. And yet he says, when is Easter? Less than 2 weeks away? Oh, we're going back to work by Easter.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Like, so now he's saying, the next 2, 3, 4 weeks is gonna be a bloodbath. People, be prepared. Just a week ago, I brought this up with Ali earlier, either before stream or on Discord. I was like, just like a week and a half ago, he was saying, yeah, Easter is go, economy back on.
Yeah.
Well, and now he's trying to say there's only going to be 200,000 people who die. Like, I have seen multiple models of this.
Yeah,
from
that's a
reputable
very
scientists.
low number.
And what I have read repeatedly was, if we can reduce all social contact by 95% until the end of April, then maybe only 200,000 people will die. If we can't, then if it's as low as, say, 70% reduction, we're looking at a minimum of 2 million deaths just in the US, and by August, with the peak hitting in August.
Yeah, me and Ali was having a very serious discussion about martial law and Donald Trump. It's a very, very scary ass discussion that might be a stream at some point. I don't know if we want to go there right now, though.
Well, one of my best friends, she lives in Australia, and we've been talking a lot about this. How, because they're on lockdown, like they can literally get fined if they're outside their house without a reason. And she's like, as much as it sucks, and she has to, because she has asthma and so does her daughter anyway, so they don't want to take the chance. But as much as it sucks, their rates of infection are vastly below ours. And we have, like, the town that I live in. I mean, the school is out. In fact, they just called today to tell us that the kids are out of school for the rest of the year. But there aren't, there's a few shops that have closed down, but for the most part, it's pretty much business as usual. Like, I couldn't go. I went to the pharmacy the other day, and I ended up walking to get my son some fast food, and they wouldn't let me in. They wouldn't let me in the dining room. So the guy just ended up, like, going inside and getting it for me. But I mean, other than that, there's no curfews. There's no laws about being out. The churches all closed down actually quite quickly, which I was surprised about, because this town is like 90% church. But so what ended up happening was a bunch of the churches banded together and decided to hold a community service on our square. It was one of the first weekends that it got really bad, and within a week, there were our ERs were overflowing, and we have, I think it's like 6 teachers so far in our school system that have come down with it. And it's gross, and do fucking something about it, and as much as it sucks that, so the economy is not great right now, so we need a stimulus. But you know what? The more people that die and the worse this gets, the longer it's going to be protracted, and the worse it's going to be for the economy. Right now, Trump just sees his son-in-law's business got went under, or Mar-a-Lago is shut down, and he's just not making money, and that's all he cares about, and that's all he cared about from the beginning, because he knew damn well that if he made a big deal about it, people were going to panic and shit was going to happen. But instead of it just righting itself because he's a fucktard and he thought that's what was going to happen, it got worse. And now he's still trying to push it. Let's open our economy again. Let's get people back to work. Well, let's just fucking kill everybody. Why not?
Well, and for what it's worth, for people that are questioning that number in the chat, the current U.S. mortality rate, according to National Review, is 2.16%, 4,099 deaths out of 189,711 cases. The worldwide death rate, which they're saying is likely an underestimation, is 5%, 44,214 deaths.
5%? Yeah,
out of 885,301 cases. So currently,
I apologize. I read somewhere it was 18%, so that's totally my fault.
Yeah, so it's currently about 5% for those that were questioning that rate, which the rate that I reported, that 2 million deaths, is a little under 8%, I believe, is what I was told. In the reviews and such that I was watching, of sort of the breakdown of that science. So, and again, 8% is closer to what we think is the actual total, because we know that the numbers coming out of China are doctored to reduce their death rates. Like, the death rates in other countries are much, much higher.
Yeah, maybe I missaw what I was reading, and it was 8%, not 18%. I apologize for that.
Yeah, the current rate is just about 5%, according to the most up-to-date numbers that I'm looking at right now worldwide. Our rate is 2.6%.
I mean, you have to remember, Donald Trump was saying, and a lot of people were saying initially that it would only be 1%. and they were trying to compare it to the flu, which was like 0.01%, right? So, I mean, you have to remember that. I apologize for skewing the numbers in my comment, but you have to remember what they were saying, because you have to hold them accountable for it, because they knew better. We see it. They were selling fucking stocks. Like, new information just came out on that one chick who had to reveal more stocks that she fucking sold. I mean, these people were panicking and telling us it was okay.
Yeah, and but it's not.
And even at a rate of 5%, even if we go with the more conservative rate of 5%, you're still talking about 1.5 million people dying. You're still talking about 1 in every 20 people dying.
And the thing, I was wrong about the 18%, but the 2% number is questionable. That's very, very questionable. And it's probably not accurate at all. We need more information.
Yeah. There's so much that we don't necessarily have all the data for at the moment anyway. So, but it's a lot of misinformation. I've heard people tell me that, nobody under the age of 20 has died yet. And yet there have been instances, but they called back and called back to it and attributed it to, they had COVID, but it wasn't COVID that killed them or whatever.
They're trying their best to undercount, because this administration does not want these numbers to be high. There is this overcorrection that is being done, where a lot of things, like they're saying, people are only dying of complications from other conditions. No, coronavirus is clearly playing a role in all of these deaths.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate, it's important to understand that the next month is very vital in this conversation. So even if you're going on the very conservative side, even the president of the United States now is saying, yeah, the next month is going to be hard for everybody. I plan on not leaving again, ever. Mm-hmm. Like not until, just not. I mean, and this country really needs to shut down. We have conservative states. I think Florida just did it today, but they're still allowing church services. The churches have to shut down. You gotta do it right now. You just gotta do it.
Service. Suck my dick. It's a vital service.
Yeah, if you're a convenience store and you don't have a gas pump outside, you should be shut down right now. It should really only be essential. And even here, where we have that order, it's not quite.
Knock in food deserts and such, that's a problem.
Food deserts? What do you mean?
There are areas in the country, and given that you live near Detroit, you should probably know this. There are areas in the country where the only groceries that are available are at convenience stores.
Yeah, but I'm talking in urban areas where I'm at right now. You have a gas station on every block. You don't need the convenience store that's right across the street open either. I lost my job. I'm not for people losing their jobs, but I'm for people living. And we literally have the president of the United States, who has downplayed this from the very beginning, now saying that it's going to be a bloodbath. And not only that, but today declared a war on drugs part 2 to make a distraction for the bloodbath that's fucking coming. We're literally going to be killing brown drug dealers right now when hundreds of thousands of Americans are about to die. I don't want to cause a panic here, but we have a buffoon in the White House, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
So, Knock, I'm going to remind you that at the beginning I told you were going to wake the fuck up and get angry and have plenty of energy.
Yeah,
you told me I was wrong.
So fucking sleepy too.
I know exactly how to trigger the ever-loving fuck out of you.
I know. I'm so fucking just hot right now. All right, I'll shut up. We'll let our guest speak. Go ahead, Momma Atheist.
I don't know. To bring it away from to go COVID for a second, I work in my field. What I'm focusing on now is the oceans, because the oceans are incredibly important in terms of climate change and
one of the most important things, I think.
Yeah, 50% of our oxygen comes from the ocean, and so many ecosystems, even those on land, are interconnected with those that are in and around the oceans. And I don't know. It's hard to shift back because I was going to talk about this, but no,
I'm sorry. I got to take this moment, and I'll let you continue, Mama. Dr. Brian Oblivion, I've really enjoyed your comments. Go fuck yourself.
I don't. This is the first time I've ever actually. I mean, when I go on Atheist Pastor Show, sometimes we get like Darth Dawkins on to fuck with us, but I've never actually had, people in chat like do this before.
Mama
I am
Atheist,
hated.
like we get so much fucking hate because
I
like
am a hated man.
what we are known for is we are muckrakers. Like the two of us will bring just about anybody on to talk about just about anything. Dumpster fires happen all the time. As long as you're not saying slurs and you're not misgendering people, like we can have a conversation because we're willing to expose really, really fucked up ideas. But unfortunately, that also means that the most unsavory parts of the community, when you go after them, they're basically cults, so you get a lot of fucking hate as a result. So basically, we're the people who help clean up the neo-Nazis. Knock was one of the first people covering the NIFB because it's literally in his backyard. Like, he's gotten death threats on his kid from them and that kind of shit. Like, we're known for that.
Yeah, I am like enemy number one to very fundamental Christian, or maybe not number one, but I'm high on that list of enemies to the Christian fundamentals. But I have a lot of good Christian friends. I don't dislike Christians. I just dislike most of Christianity.
I get it. No, I was just trying to bring it about. There's just we tend to overlook the oceans, especially when it comes to saving our planet or fighting against climate change, because we don't live there and we don't see a lot of the effects. At least from point A to point B. Like you mentioned before, we have the extreme weather patterns and stuff, but that's a direct result of what's happening in our oceans. We have the right now. I've been working on a paper for a while about the melting permafrost. That there is something like 10 gigatons of carbon materials trapped within the permafrost that on our planet, and as those permafrost layers slowly melt, you're releasing things that are decaying, and you're releasing toxins, you're releasing deadly diseases, things that we don't have immunities to anymore. So it just remember, I guess is what I'm saying, that the oceans are a vital part of this planet, and climate change affects them and it affects us as well. That's I just wanted to kind of bring that up. That was an important point to me. That's it.
I agree, even though I stepped away. So Allie agreed too.
Well, yeah, she was talking about the potential environmental fallout from, like, the accelerationism that's basically going to happen when the ice caps finish melting, basically. Like, the sheer amount of bullshit that is going to be, thrown up into the atmosphere, never to be caught again. Like, it is absolutely insane. There is a much earlier point of no return than we initially estimated because we did not originally take that into account in a lot of early models. So that point of no return is actually closer than we thought it was.
Well, and our issue too is that while we've known for a while that the polar ice caps have been melting, they're melting at a much different and much quicker rate than we expected them to, and we also didn't expect all of this shit to be coming up from the permafrost as we lose the layers of snow, the ground starts to melt. Just discovering, like, chlamydia. There's an ancient form of chlamydia that has come out of the permafrost, which I thought was really interesting. There are quite a few sexually transmitted diseases, in fact, that are trapped in these layers of permafrost and within the ice. And there's a lot of just dead flora and fauna that are frozen. So they're preserved at the moment, but as the ice melts, this stuff starts to decay, and it lets off carbon and it lets off methane. So
well, and it's not even, you mentioned deadly diseases earlier too. It's not even just the carbon emissions, and it's not even just the melting ice caps. We're also pushing deeper and deeper into unexplored natural territories with civilization, with the expansion of civilization, cutting down the rainforest, things of that nature. But even like less so, pushing more and more into forested territories and things in many different countries, including this one. We're coming into contact with creatures that have never interacted with humans that may be carrying variants as they collide with our populations, variants of diseases that we have never seen. Like COVID and SARS are just the start.
Yeah. And I did a video about that,
Sup, Cupcake?
Talking about like coming to a channel that has some like shit up in the chat. Matt Powell, what is up, my NIFB hate monger brother?
Somebody must have told him that you summoned him earlier. Hey, Matt, he was actually saying nice things about you earlier, Matt.
Yeah, I said that he was thinking about me because he, put out a new video. I haven't seen it yet. I believe it's like our debate on the MDD because like he thinks it makes him look good. Matt, you compared gay people to Nazis. You compared gay people to Hitler. You didn't look good.
That's pretty awful.
Oh, he's one of the most awful. But what's up, Cupcake? I'm glad you stopped by. Meet Momma Atheist. She's a smart scientist. You know that thing you deny?
Yeah, the answer to the question, have you been in a lab and have you actually studied these things yourself, Momma Atheist?
Yeah,
your answer? There you go. Like, we love having scientists on. So in case you care, Matt Powell had a quote unquote debate with Naka, and I'm putting quotes because the first one, the footage was heavily doctored to make it look like Naka completely like fucked up and his camera stuff was messed with. And then the second debate, he had some trouble with parts of it, but again, Matt Powell has heavily doctored the footage to make it look like Naka lost way worse than he ever had.
Well, no, I give him credit for winning. Like, he won the debate because I didn't go there to debate. I went there to call him out for being a douchebag, and I did that. And I lost the debate. I fully give that 100%. Matt Powell won the debate on evolution against a raging atheist. While he fucking exposed him and his ideology and his movement, the NIFB, for the hate mongering motherfuckers that they are. Yeah, so Momma Atheist, you don't have to worry about raging on this channel because I will do it.
And by the way, Matt Powell, I know that you kind of like bitched out a little bit when you said that you would debate me on evolution, but like legit, I do know my shit. And my answer to that question of have you worked in a lab on geological projects is actually yes.
And he actually... Matt Powell knows I'm a man of my word. Sorry to cut you off, Ellie. Matt Powell knows I'm a man of my word. So when I say that I will be a fair moderator and it won't be a me and Matt Powell thing, it'll be an Elia Kai versus Matt Powell thing. He should understand that I mean that 100% and it would happen exactly that way.
Or we could even see if James on Modern Day Debate, who is a Christian, would be willing to moderate that as well. I would love to debate you on evolution, Matt Powell. James and I are actually looking for a Christian to debate me on evolution right now.
So welcome to A Raging Atheist, Momma Atheist. Meet one of the most hated people in our community, Matt Powell. We call him Cupcake lovingly. Maybe after the show. After the show, we'll tell you why.
Okay. Well, it's nice to meet you, and you say our community, but it's not our community because
he's not in our community, but we all know Cupcake well, most of us anyway.
So he's asking for a link. Do you want a link to StreamYard, Matt? Like, is that what you're asking for a link to?
Well, for one, I'm down for it as long as Momma Atheist is down for it. She's the guest of the night, Matt, not you.
It's your channel, whatever you want.
Hey, sup, Jay? Nevermore Tavern.
Hi, honey. Jay.
All right, we'll let Matt Powell on. Matt is usually respectful. He's never broken any rules. He'll probably have some questions, so we'll let him ask it, and I will be perfectly fine. So Matt, let me think. How do I communicate with you outside of my phone because my daughter's on that right now? email Matt Powell. So here we go. Oh, not there. All right.
All right, we'll see if he comes in, because honestly, I would love to set up a debate with him. That'd be fun. Especially because I had kind of have an understanding of both abiogenesis and the actual, a lot of the physics around the Big Bang that he doesn't. I have friends who are astrophysicists, so
Yeah.
you get a lot of contacts in, you know, like all of science when you go to school for STEM.
Yeah, you do. Especially when you switch it around a little bit. So
I got to go so far back to get to Matt. So just give me 1 second, Matt.
All right, so we're getting pretty close to the top of the hour. Do you have anything else that you want to cover that you didn't get a chance to talk about, or do you want to sort of talk a little bit about a concluding statement? I know that, again, like, I noticed that you got a lot more confident in the middle when you started to get a little bit angry, so congratulations. You do speak very, very well when you're not thinking about what you're speaking.
yeah, I'm not the greatest at actually just speaking, but if I get angry, it comes out more.
Well, I mean, I think that it's your belief that you're bad at talking, because honestly, you kept an entire audience entertained, and a lot of the people who showed up here are not our regular audience. Like, over half of that chat right now is not people that normally come talk to us.
All right. I sent the link, Matt. So come on in.
So,
when
like,
when you're
clearly
ready.
you've got a fan base, and clearly you can speak eloquently enough that you drew an entire fan base here that doesn't normally come chill with us. So, you know what? Stop with the unconfidence. You're telling yourself a story that sucks, and it's not true.
This has been a very interesting conversation. This is we are definitely having you back on the channel. I would love to have you in an open room setting to combat some of the crazies that come in every once in a while. Usually it's a lot of atheists, but sometimes we get some crazies.
Well, you had I think Ali said there was a climate change denier the other night. I would have, if I would have liked to have come in on that, but I just wasn't at my computer at that moment. But yeah,
Oh yeah,
I have no problem with that.
It's always open though. I used to do it a lot, and we got away from it, but we're gonna get back to it. And that extends to Christians, even Matt Powell. Like I'm usually I want to be an open book again, and I want people to come on. Matt is usually respectful when he does these things, so I expect him to be respectful, and I also expect that if he comes in, he'll probably ask some questions that might be designed to make a stir. We'll see. I've dealt with Cupcake a lot, but
yeah, like Momma Atheist, I want to remind you again, like I would say over half the names that we've seen popping up in our chat are not our usual fan base that comes and chills here. So you definitely brought a lot of people to come watch you, even if our regular audience didn't normally come, because our regular audience, they're touch and go when it comes to any sort of political topic.
There was a big debate tonight or earlier today, and it was
What's up, Ann Kennedy?
It was brutal. What's up, Ann? It was I had so much fun watching it. It was Scholar Fiction and S.J. Thompson and Thomason, whatever. And it was brutal, and I enjoyed it. But Skylar went live shortly before us to go over that debate. So I highly suspected from the start that we would be competing with Skylar. I'm actually fairly happy with the numbers. Considering. So yeah, I think that's a lot due to you and who you brought. And this has been a great conversation. These are the conversations I love to have, honestly.